Have you ever wondered what exactly a home inspector looks for in an inspection, what you should be aware of? I have sellers who are really concerned when a home inspector comes and buyers unsure whether the house is good for them to buy. So today we're interviewing an expert. Stay tuned. So today I have here with me Patrick from Kelly Inspection Group. So Patrick is doing inspections for a long time. Why don't you explain a little bit about your experience?
Thank you, Theresa. Yes, I've been doing home inspections the last 8 years in this market here. And I'm second generation. My father started this company over 20 years ago and has been serving the Santa Clara area for quite some time. So we've seen many homes and dealt with quite a lot of problems.
Yes, awesome. So today we're going to get into things he looks for, what are common problems in the San Jose area, so that you feel really educated at your next home inspection.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So can you tell me, how do you start your inspection? What's a process you go through and what key things you look for?
Sure. So for this market here, water is really the enemy.
Okay.
You know, anything that we can deter water away from the home is always going to be positive. So typically, home inspectors cross over with the termite inspectors, whereas we all are looking for evidence as to what's caused damage and how to prevent it going forward. So that standpoint, we really look for downspouts from gutters, you know, proper drainage from roofs, things like that can really benefit the overall performance of foundations, homes, any kind of moisture damage, really.
Okay, awesome. And so you're talking about water running away from the foundation.
Exactly.
So the roof is a part of that. You also look at the roof, right?
Yeah,
I've
we
seen
do.
You on a roof.
Thank you. That's true. Yeah. So pretty much we start with the outside of the home. Typically, we'll start take a photo from the outside property, look at everything, kind of get an idea as to how the layout of the house is. Go around the whole exterior, go on the roof, the garage, inside, above, in the attic, and down below.
Okay, so you end in the crawl space in case you see anything in the house that you can go under.
And that's to make sure we put all the water down, every pipe that we can, and get all of our data to really get the broad strokes as to what could happen in the crawl space. You know, all this evidence that if we see kind of crack on the outside of the home, any kind of pooling moisture, that is all indications for us to take time and really pay attention down the crawl space.
Patrick, not all foundations in this area have a crawl space, right?
No. Yes.
And what is a crawl space, maybe for those who don't really understand?
So a crawl space is an area underneath the foundation or area underneath the home that's a raised portion that allows you to run ductwork, plumbing, any kind of structural components that really you need access to underneath the property.
Okay.
There's a couple different types of foundations though that prevent the access to that area, which would be a slab which is built on grade, which has no cavity underneath there. And that's more being used in multi-family builds, townhomes, big developments, things like that, as well as newer homes too, because it's a little bit more of an efficient way to build as well. It's less material to use. Things are embedded in the concrete, so they kind of tend to stay there, you know, a little bit uninterrupted and less vulnerable to damage. But everything has its pros and cons with construction.
But are there certain things that you look for in a slab foundation that maybe you a different technique, I guess, with a raised foundation?
It is. There are different items that we look for. Typically for slabs, it's sloping. You know, if there's any kind of real bowingness to the floor, that can be indications that either it was poured originally with the slope or that there is settlement in the corners, which is really not a good idea for foundations to have that going on. And once you are experiencing something like that, it's a really good idea to get your home evaluated.
Yeah, so a foundation expert.
Exactly.
So we need to do that video. All right, perfect. So we've gone from the water and the foundation to the roof and gutters. When you're outside of the house, what other systems are you looking at?
So typically, we're just trying to get an overall performance of how the home is built and the systems that are in place and how they're performing. So I would go through a checklist of where the water shutoffs are from the street to the home. Same thing for electrical, if it's a above head incoming line or if it's below the ground, where that location is, the amperage of the main panel, all the breakers and everything associated with that. I open up the panels, make sure all the connections are okay. And then for gas as well, we look for the main meter.
Okay, perfect. All the major systems that feed your home will be evaluated, but you don't check out solar. You'll note if there's solar.
Exactly. Right? Yeah, that's a little bit beyond our scope of an evaluation, just because that's a more newer technology that's always emerging, and we're unable to really keep up with standards as things are changing so quickly. So we leave that to specialists to really get you a hands-on kind of explanation as to what your solar system's providing, and then the lease, if you own it outright. That's just information that we typically don't have on home inspections, but it's very, very positive to see any kind of offset of your bill or any kind of supplemental energy source besides the city.
Perfect. So definitely that's something that I can help with, and we get seller disclosures in regards to whether the solar is leased or owned, how much it's saved on their power bill, what their true up statement is, and what they're actually net paying. So those are all important factors I can help you dig through, as well as we can get an additional electrician expert out there to take a look if you want. But Patrick would give a big overview.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that all that is great information to have too going forward, especially if you're able to give that documentation to potential buyers. It's always beneficial to know.
Perfect. So let's talk about some of the common problems you see in San Jose.
Sure. San Jose has little pockets where I'm looking for specific items. Like in Willow Glen, for instance, lots of soil upheaval and conditions related to dry situations like that.
Yeah, it's expansive soil, right?
Exactly.
And high water tables, so there's a lot of movement, soil movement.
A lot of movement going on. Typically older foundations, if they haven't been replaced or any kind of retrofitting been done. So those are really key items that I look for in that area. Whereas in the area we're here now, Blossom Hill, there's quite a lot of hillside sloping going on where water tables are going through the underside of your home, and passive water is typical. Whereas if I were to see that somewhere maybe in East San Jose, I would be more concerned if there's higher water levels and then moisture levels underneath the home in the crawl space.
Yeah.
That can be indications of leaks potentially, whereas here I would more be concerned about directing water away, because there's always going to be water in the soil.
So you mentioned Willow Glen and foundation problems. I know foundations are huge and we need an expert to that, but what are some things maybe when a buyer is touring a home or a seller is dealing with their home that they can kind of look out for to be a flag for potential foundation?
Absolutely. I think really any indication that structural issues are present would be cracking above windows or doors that's significant. Those older homes will have some cracking due to settlement over the years. That's very typical. And then if you see any real large cracks, any kind of excessive sloping in the home, or as you walk through it you see real dips and dives here and there, that can be indications that areas of foundations have settled rapidly. Cracked can also occur there.
I've noticed that when I'm walking houses, sometimes I'm like, whoa, I'm leaning to one side, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is all indications that it should be further evaluated, but that's also not indications completely that there's something wrong. That's very common for these things to happen. Things shift around, especially over time. So a lot of homeowners will retrofit their homes to accommodate that slope over time. It doesn't really mean that there's a huge issue wrong.
Got it. Yeah, especially with the older homes in Willow Glen, or I mean really anywhere, any homes built in the 50s, 60s and prior can definitely have some problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Patrick, I know you do pre-home sale inspections, like for a seller. Yes. Very common here in San Jose for a seller to get one done ahead of time, and I recommend that for a couple reasons. Number one, if there's anything wrong, you can fix it, potentially before you go on the market. Number two, you at least know what you're negotiating when a buyer comes in. You're not blindsided by something in the middle of escrow.
Absolutely.
But then there's also buyer inspections, whether the seller did one or not. Some buyers opt to do an inspection. So I know you definitely do those for buyers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We provide both of those services, and typically from a seller standpoint, it's really good to be aware of what you're representing and what you're going to be listing. As far as knowing the major concerns, if there are any, addressing those before you get to market can really save a lot of confusion and a lot of speculation in buyers.
Okay, perfect. And then if a buyer is attending the inspection, what should they be doing? How should they interact with you?
Well, it really depends on. I'm more carefree. I really don't mind if buyers follow me around. I think it's beneficial for everybody to be aware of what concerns are in my mind too, but it's a slow, laborsome process. So really I'm taking a lot of time to creep around corners, poke things, look at everything. So it may be a little bit not as the most exciting procedure. However, I have spoken with clients before that have followed me, and they've always benefited from it. I think it's a very good thing for somebody to do who's coming into a home, to be familiar with it. And we see homes every day. I look at 10 homes a week typically, and that's beneficial to have that perspective as you're coming in. You can ask questions. I typically reserve the end of my inspection to go over the kind of headlining items. But if I see something that's apparent right here and you're next to me, I'll certainly show you about it.
Yeah, perfect. I definitely recommend you attend the inspection, but you might want to take measurements or check out the cabinets and the closets inside the house while he's doing his outside perimeter. And I've had Patrick go, wait, I want to show you something, and come and grab buyers. So there's kind of could be a blend, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's really up to interpretation per day, you know, depending on what really a priority for the buyer would be. If they're looking and they're fine with having trust in me to find all the items and then present them to that at the end of the inspection, that certainly is a good route to go. If somebody's a little bit more concerned about a specific thing, sometimes it can detract from our process, whereas I'm looking at this foundation or something like that and somebody says, oh my gosh, this closet over here, I really need to show you, can be a little bit of a detraction, and then it could cause us to possibly miss something.
Yeah, because you got your system in your order, right?
Exactly, yeah. Us inspectors are very routine, you know, it's unfortunate, but
it's a good thing. We don't want to miss anything.
Yeah, we want to be very due diligent and not miss anything, but there's always time to make up.
Okay, perfect. So maybe we'll just take a quick look around at a couple things, and you can point out some things that they might be aware of at an actual house.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's go for a walk. So Patrick's got us here at the side of a house at the electrical panel. So what do you see, Patrick?
So this is one of our first stops typically. This is where a lot of the electricity gets distributed throughout the home, whether it be an underground feed like it looks like here, where there's no wires overhead, everything is coming up from the soil. We'll come into this panel here and then go to either a sub panel that's somewhere else in the home that gets into more specific circuitry throughout the entire house, or it can all be isolated to this panel here. And these are really good to know where they are because they have the main shutoff breaker, which will turn off all the power to the home. If there's any kind of emergency experienced, it's really good to know where this is.
Perfect. And we're actually quite close to the gas meter as well. So
As it
something,
turns out,
something that we should look for.
This one here is the gas meter, and a lot of people don't know how to turn these off because there's no obvious shutoff valve like there would be for a water main, where there's a big yellow or a big red, you know, valve that you just put to the side. It's actually right down here. This valve is turnable, and right now it's in a vertical position. When it's horizontal, that means the gas is all shut off the flow. And we always recommend that homeowners or potential buyers were to hang a wrench here to allow easy access to that shut off.
So you don't have to dig for a tool in an emergency.
Exactly. You don't want to be scrambling when stuff's hitting the fan.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. All right. Anything else that you would like to point out?
I think that this right here would be
yes.
This home has been equipped with solar, and this is a very common step that we see. A disconnect separate from the main panel that's isolated to the solar system itself. That's for technicians to come here, work on them, or if there's anything going on, they can shut power off.
Perfect.
And it's a little bit above what I know, but I think it's certainly valuable to have.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so right now we've walked over to the water main, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, so like I said about the gas main, the colored valves are indications of newer piping, because in the past, you know, deteriorated pipes and deteriorated valves don't have that coloring. But when you see a new valve like this one here, or more recently new with the copper repipe of this home, you'll see it's colored. That's a very good and easy accessible location to have in the back of your mind. If there's any kind of leaks you find inside your home, this would be your first stop. This location is wonderful to know about, especially when you're in a situation where you hear water dripping or you see it coming out of any kind of faucet inside your home. You'd come here, shut off the water flow to the home, call a plumber and have them come evaluate it.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay. Of course. So right here, I brought us to an example of a gutter downspout with a little bit of an issue. This one right here is positioned pretty high, and it's going to allow water it's collected on the roof to come down this pipe and get distributed and pool right next to the foundation and the home itself. So what I always recommend for new buyers coming in to really get to know their home during winter, because it's going to be where a lot of problems start from. And that includes installing splash blocks underneath ends of downspouts, not for this particular kind of setup because it has a little bit of a fall. However, if it comes right down to the side of the home, you could put a splash block underneath that diverts water away from the property. At least 3 feet is what is ideal.
3 feet, good to know.
And then you could also install, they sell gutter extensions that put it a little bit further than that too. And those typically are winterizing items for the home. Somebody can add that to their maintenance list during the winter season.
Perfect. And this one's a great location. It's kind of hidden behind a bush, so you could extend it,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly, yeah.
And not make it ugly, even better.
Yep, exactly.
Perfect. Patrick walked us inside the house, and he's going to show us the crawl space and some things you should be aware of.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're on the listing end, these are really good to know where they are. Especially for our purposes, when we come here, it's very helpful to have personal items removed from the cover of the crawl space, as well as an access for the attic space too.
Perfect.
So right here, we pulled away some items. It's always a good idea to keep this area clear, especially if you're having work done in your home. It's always going to make technicians a little bit easier to get in there. So what we're looking at here is the access to get underneath the home. This will give you access to the plumbing, electrical connections underneath there, structural framing, things like that really make the home support.
Okay, perfect. So this house obviously has the crawl space access that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Perfect. So thank you so much for joining us today, learning more about home inspections. I hope you found this really valuable. And Patrick, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
Absolutely. It's really my pleasure. I think that anything that we can do to inform a buyer, a seller, is really going to be beneficial for the whole process. I think it's everyone's interest to get a home inspection and to hire the best in the biz.
Oh, absolutely. And if you want to learn more information about termites, I definitely recommend you watch my video on that. Thanks for joining.